The betrayal. From the moment Dumo returned to the palace without Abioye, the kingdom fell into mourning. Word spread quickly. Prince Abioye had been lost in the Serengeti, claimed by the merciless wilderness. The people wept for their beloved prince, the one they had hoped would lead them into a prosperous future. But while the kingdom grieved, Dumo quietly ascended to power. With the king aging and the royal advisors unsure of how to proceed after Abioye's loss, it was Dumo who began filling the power vacuum. He appeared the most capable, the most ready to lead. Yet, in the quiet corners of the palace, whispers began to spread. Some suspected that Abioye's disappearance wasn't an accident. After all, why had Dumo, the prince's most trusted confidant, returned unharmed? Why had there been no search party sent for Abioye, no effort to recover the prince's body? But Dumo was clever. He knew how to silence these rumors before they gained any traction. With a calculated move, he assured the people that their prince was gone and that the kingdom must move forward. The mourning was brief, and soon, Dumo began establishing himself as the king's unofficial heir. But what had driven Dumo to this treacherous act? What led him to betray his closest friend? To understand, we must look deeper into Dumo's mind and heart. The roots of envy. Dumo had always lived in Abioye's shadow. Even as children, it was Abioye who was praised for his bravery, Abioye who was adored by the people, and Abioye who would one day inherit the throne. Dumo was the loyal friend, always one step behind, always the second choice. In public, he smiled and played his part as the prince's confidant. But in private, the weight of his jealousy grew heavier by the day. He had tried to ignore it, convincing himself that he was content with his place in life. But every time the people cheered for Abioye, every time the king bestowed praise on his son, it chipped away at Dumo's composure. The envy festered, gnawing at him like a sickness. He began to see Abioye not as a friend, but as an obstacle standing in the way of the power he believed should rightfully be his. Why should Abioye, simply by birthright, have everything handed to him while Dumo was forced to stand in the background? And so, Dumo's mind began to turn with dark thoughts. He watched closely, looking for weaknesses in the prince, moments where Abioye seemed vulnerable. Every compliment Abioye received, every ounce of respect he garnered, became like a dagger to Dumo's pride. The path to power was blocked, and Abioye stood in the way. Dumo knew he had to remove him. The plan takes shape. Dumo's plan didn't form overnight. It began long before that fateful night in the desert. He spent months cultivating alliances within the palace, whispering in the ears of royal advisors, planting seeds of doubt in the king's court. He needed to ensure that when Abioye was gone, there would be no one left to challenge his claim to power. But the plan hinged on one crucial moment: getting Abioye alone, far from the protection of the palace and the watchful eyes of the king's guards. It wasn't easy. Abioye was a cautious man, always thinking ahead, always surrounded by guards and trusted advisors. But Dumo knew his friend well. He knew that Abioye's sense of duty to the kingdom could be manipulated. Dumo concocted a story about a distant tribe on the edge of the Serengeti, one that had been stirring unrest and could pose a threat to the kingdom's borders. He told Abioye that it was their duty to visit this tribe, to broker peace before things escalated into war. He painted it as a diplomatic mission, one that required discretion and careful handling. Abioye, trusting his friend completely, agreed without hesitation. They would ride out together, just the two of them, to keep the mission discreet. The fateful journey. The night before their departure, the palace was alive with anticipation. Abioye's advisors cautioned him against leaving without a full guard, but the prince was resolute. He trusted Dumo, and if Dumo said they needed to keep this mission quiet, then Abioye would follow his advice. As the sun set over the Serengeti, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, the two friends prepared for their journey, their final journey together. At dawn, they set out, riding side by side into the vast wilderness. The first few hours of the journey were peaceful. They spoke of the kingdom, of the challenges they faced, and of the future they hoped to build together. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the mood began to shift. Abioye could sense something was off. Dumo was quieter than usual, his eyes scanning the horizon with an intensity that made the prince uneasy. By midday, they had entered the heart of the Serengeti. The landscape had changed. What was once rolling grasslands had become harsh and unforgiving. The heat pressed down on them, and the silence of the desert was broken only by the distant calls of animals. Abioye turned to Dumo, ready to suggest they set up camp for the night. But before he could speak, Dumo's hand moved faster than he could react. The moment of betrayal. A sharp blow to the head sent Abioye tumbling from his horse, his vision blurring as he hit the ground. The world spun around him, the heat of the desert mixing with the pain that pulsed through his skull. He tried to rise, but his limbs were weak, his body refusing to obey. And then, through the haze, he saw Dumo standing over him, the look in his eyes cold and unfeeling. "You were always meant to rule," Dumo said, his voice barely a whisper, "but it should have been me." Abioye's heart pounded in his chest, confusion mixing with disbelief. This was his friend, the man he had trusted with his life. How could this be happening? But there was no time to ask questions, no time to understand. Dumo raised his hand again, and the second blow sent Abioye into darkness. As the prince's body lay still in the dust, Dumo mounted his horse and turned back toward the kingdom. He didn't look back. There was no need. In his mind, Abioye was already dead. The aftermath. By the time Dumo returned to the palace, the story was already in motion. He told the court that they had been ambushed by wild animals in the Serengeti, that Abioye had fought bravely but had been overwhelmed. There was no body to recover, no proof of his death, but the desert was unforgiving. The court had no reason to doubt Dumo, and with the king in his final days, the advisors began to look to Dumo for leadership. But there were those who whispered, those who questioned the truth of Dumo's tale. Some believed that Abioye's disappearance was too convenient, too sudden, but in a kingdom already grieving, few had the courage to speak their suspicions aloud. The palace was thick with silence, and in that silence, Dumo's rise to power began. As Dumo took his place beside the king, one thing became clear. The kingdom was now his for the taking. But while the palace mourned, deep in the heart of the Serengeti, something stirred. Abioye's fate was not sealed. The desert had plans for him, plans that even Dumo could not foresee. A prince lost to the desert. Abioye lay motionless in the heart of the Serengeti, the unforgiving sun beating down on his body. The sand beneath him felt like fire, scorching his skin. His head throbbed from the blows, and his thoughts were fragmented. Darkness swirled in and out of his consciousness. He didn't know how long he had been lying there, abandoned, left for dead by the man he once called his brother. The desert was vast and empty, stretching endlessly in every direction. It was a place where the weak perished and only the strong survived. But as hours passed, something remarkable began to happen. The desert, which had claimed so many lives, seemed to stir around Abioye. The wind shifted, and a cool breeze swept over him, carrying with it whispers of voices not of this world. The spirits of the Serengeti. As Abioye drifted in and out of consciousness, he became aware of these voices. They were faint at first, like a distant echo carried by the wind. But as night fell, and the stars lit up the sky, the whispers grew louder, clearer. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, but their intent was unmistakable. These were not the voices of men. They were the voices of the desert spirits, ancient and powerful beings that had watched over the Serengeti for centuries. The desert was not just a barren wasteland. It was alive, and it had chosen Abioye for a purpose. Through the fog of pain, Abioye slowly opened his eyes. He could barely move, but he saw strange figures in the distance, shimmering shapes that danced on the horizon, not entirely human, but not entirely otherworldly either. As they approached, their forms became clearer. They were the desert spirits, their bodies made of dust and wind, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. One of them knelt beside him, its hand hovering above his forehead. Abioye felt a strange warmth flood through his body, as if the spirit was breathing life back into him. His pain began to fade, replaced by a sensation of weightlessness, as if he was floating above the sands. The spirit spoke, its voice resonating deep within his mind. "You are not meant to die here, Prince Abioye," the spirit said. "Your fate is tied to this land, but your journey has only just begun." A prophecy foretold. The spirits carried Abioye to a cave nestled deep within the desert, a place hidden from the world of men. The cave walls were covered in ancient symbols, etched into the stone by hands long since turned to dust. In the center of the cave stood an altar, and on the altar lay a scroll, its surface glowing faintly in the dim light. The spirits led Abioye to the altar and gestured for him to read. With trembling hands, Abioye unrolled the scroll. The words were written in a language he had never seen before, yet somehow he understood their meaning. It was a prophecy that had been foretold centuries ago, long before Abioye's kingdom had risen from the sands. The prophecy spoke of a prince, born under the sun and destined to rule, but whose bloodline carried a dark secret. It foretold a great betrayal, and a kingdom that would fall into ruin unless the prince could uncover the truth about his past. The words chilled Abioye to his core. The spirits watched silently as Abioye absorbed the weight of the prophecy. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of it. A great betrayal. Was this speaking of Dumo? And what was this dark secret about his family? Abioye had always believed in the righteousness of his bloodline, but now doubt began to creep into his mind. What had his father hidden from him? And was Abioye destined to repeat the sins of his ancestors? The price of the spirit's help. As the prophecy sank in, Abioye felt a new strength rising within him. He was still weak, still broken, but something had shifted. The spirits had brought him back from the edge of death, but he knew their help came with a price. The leader of the spirits stepped forward, its voice reverberating through the cave. "We have saved you, Prince Abioye, but nothing in this world is given freely. To reclaim your throne, you must accept our gift and the burden that comes with it." Abioye met the spirit's glowing eyes. "What burden?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The spirit gestured to the prophecy. "The bloodline of your family is cursed, tainted by the choices of those who came before you. If you wish to reclaim your kingdom, you must confront the darkness within your own lineage. But know this, once you begin this journey, there is no turning back. The spirits will guide you, but the path will be perilous, and you may not like what you find at the end." Abioye clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had no choice. If he didn't take back the throne, Dumo would continue to corrupt the kingdom, and everything his family had built would be destroyed. But the idea of uncovering a dark secret about his own bloodline filled him with dread. Still, Abioye was not one to shy away from a challenge. "I accept," he said firmly, his voice filled with determination. "I will face whatever darkness lies ahead. I will reclaim my throne." The spirit's gift. The spirits nodded in unison, their forms swirling around Abioye like a whirlwind of dust. One by one, they placed their hands on him, and Abioye felt a surge of power flow through his body. It was as if the very essence of the Serengeti had been infused into his veins. The spirits had given him more than just the strength to survive. They had given him the power to face the challenges ahead. But as the power coursed through him, Abioye also felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just about reclaiming a throne. It was about righting the wrongs of the past, confronting the darkness that had haunted his family for generations. When the ritual was complete, the spirits began to fade, their forms dissipating into the wind. Only their leader remained, its eyes fixed on Abioye. "Remember, Prince," the spirit said, "your journey will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. The prophecy is not set in stone. Your choices will shape your destiny and the destiny of your kingdom. We will be watching." And with that, the spirit vanished, leaving Abioye alone in the cave, a renewed sense of purpose. Abioye stood in the silence of the cave, his mind racing with the enormity of what lay ahead. He had been given a second chance, a chance to reclaim his throne, to uncover the truth about his family, and to prevent the kingdom from falling into ruin. But the path before him was fraught with danger, and the prophecy loomed over him like a dark cloud. Still, Abioye was no longer the broken man who had been left for dead in the desert. He had been reborn, strengthened by the spirits of the Serengeti, and he would not rest until justice was done. With a renewed sense of purpose, Abioye left the cave and began his journey back to the kingdom. The desert stretched out before him, vast and unforgiving, but Abioye no longer feared it. The spirits had given him their blessing, and now it was time to fulfill his destiny. A kingdom in turmoil. As Abioye made his way back across the Serengeti, the weight of the prophecy and the dark revelations of his family's past burdened his every step. The journey was long and arduous, the desert winds biting at his skin, but Abioye pressed on, driven by a single purpose: to reclaim his throne and confront Dumo. The spirits had gifted him the strength to survive, but they had also left him with questions that gnawed at the back of his mind. Days passed, and the landscape began to shift. The endless desert gave way to familiar plains, dotted with the small villages that lay on the outskirts of the kingdom. Abioye knew he had to remain hidden. If word spread of his return too soon, Dumo would surely send his forces to capture him before he could reveal the truth. The people believed their prince was dead, and he needed to use that assumption to his advantage. As he drew closer to the heart of the kingdom, Abioye saw firsthand the impact of Dumo's rule. Once thriving villages now lay in disrepair, their people downtrodden and weary. Markets that had once been bustling with trade were now quiet, their stalls abandoned. It was clear that Dumo had wasted no time consolidating power, using fear and manipulation to tighten his grip on the throne. A disguised return. Abioye knew he couldn't return as the prince he once was. He needed to move through his kingdom as a shadow, unseen and unheard. He discarded the remnants of his royal garb, trading them for the simple clothes of a commoner. His face, once known to every villager and noble in the kingdom, was now obscured by a hood, his identity hidden beneath layers of dust and grime. In this disguise, Abioye moved through the kingdom's capital unnoticed. He walked among the people, listening to their conversations, observing the changes that had taken place since his supposed death. The once vibrant city now felt heavy with despair. The people whispered in hushed tones about their new ruler Dumo and the strange, swift manner in which he had taken the throne. Rumors of corruption and cruelty had spread, and many believed the kingdom was on the brink of collapse. As Abioye walked through the streets, he was struck by the stark contrast between the kingdom he had once known and the one before him now. Dumo had twisted the heart of the kingdom, turning it into a place of fear and oppression. Abioye's blood boiled with anger, but he knew that his rage alone would not be enough to reclaim the throne. He needed a plan, a way to confront Dumo that would expose the truth without leading to more bloodshed, uncovering family secrets. Before confronting Dumo, Abioye knew he had to understand the full scope of the prophecy and the dark secret that haunted his bloodline. He had to learn the truth about his family's past if he was to prevent the kingdom's downfall. The Cave of the Spirits had shown him glimpses of this darkness, but Abioye needed more answers. To find them, Abioye sought out the oldest records of the royal family, kept deep within the archives beneath the palace. It was a place few knew existed, a labyrinth of forgotten history buried beneath the very throne Dumo now occupied. Getting inside would be no small feat, but Abioye had always been skilled at slipping past palace guards undetected. Years of training as a prince had taught him the secret pathways through the palace, the hidden corridors that only a select few knew about. Under the cover of night, Abioye made his way to the palace. The palace he had once called home now felt foreign, its halls filled with unfamiliar guards loyal to Dumo. But Abioye's knowledge of the secret passages allowed him to slip past the patrols and descend into the dark, winding tunnels that led to the royal archives. The archives were a vast collection of scrolls and ancient texts, many of them documenting the long history of Abioye's ancestors. Dust hung thick in the air as Abioye sifted through the records, searching for anything that might shed light on the prophecy. Hours passed, but finally, Abioye found what he was looking for, a collection of scrolls detailing the reign of his great-grandfather King Ogian. A dark legacy revealed. As Abioye read through the scrolls, the dark truth of his family's legacy began to unfold before him. King Ogian, once revered as a wise and just ruler, had made a grave mistake, a mistake that would haunt his descendants for generations. In an attempt to protect the kingdom from a foreign invasion, Odion had struck a deal with the desert spirits. The spirits had promised him victory in battle, but in exchange, they demanded a price. The firstborn son of each generation would carry the burden of their pact. This curse had been passed down through Abioye's family, hidden from the public and even from the royal family itself. Only the ruling king had known the full extent of the deal, and now that burden fell on Abioye. The prophecy was clear. If the prince did not uncover the truth and break the pact, the kingdom would fall into ruin, just as it had begun to do under Dumo's rule. The weight of this revelation hit Abioye like a physical blow. His ancestors had made decisions that now endangered the future of the entire kingdom. The desert spirits had kept their promise, but the cost had been far greater than any of them could have imagined. Abioye's bloodline was cursed, and the curse had already begun to take its toll. Moment of decision. With the truth of his family's past now laid bare, Abioye knew what he had to do. The prophecy had warned that the kingdom would fall unless the truth was uncovered. And now that Abioye knew the full story, he had the power to stop it. But breaking the pact with the desert spirits would not be easy. The spirits were ancient and powerful, and they would not release their hold on his family without a fight. But before Abioye could confront the spirits, he had to deal with the immediate threat. Dumo, the man who had betrayed him, stolen his throne, and led the kingdom into darkness. Abioye knew that Dumo's rule was built on lies, and those lies needed to be exposed. Abioye had spent years learning the intricacies of leadership, diplomacy, and battle. Now, all those lessons would be put to the ultimate test. He could not rely solely on strength to win this fight. He needed allies, and he needed to rally the people to his cause. But first, he had to reveal himself to those who still believed in him. Rallying the people. Abioye knew that simply appearing before the people as their lost prince would not be enough. Many had been convinced of his death, and even more had been swayed by Dumo's propaganda. But there were still those who were loyal to Abioye, those who had never believed Dumo's version of events. Abioye would need to find these people and rally them to his side. His first stop was the home of an old friend and advisor, Chief Udo. Udo had served as one of Abioye's most trusted mentors during his time as prince, and Abioye knew that if anyone could help him build a rebellion against Dumo, it was Udo. Under the cover of night, Abioye made his way to Udo's estate on the outskirts of the capital. When Udo saw Abioye standing at his door, alive and well, his eyes filled with shock and joy. "Prince Abioye," he whispered, pulling Abioye inside and shutting the door behind him. "We thought you were dead. How is this possible?" "There's no time to explain," Abioye said, his voice steady with resolve. "Dumo has stolen my throne and twisted this kingdom into something unrecognizable. I need your help, Udo. I need to take back what is mine." Udo didn't hesitate. "You have my loyalty, my prince. Always." With Udo's support, Abioye began to build a network of loyalists, those who had served his family for generations, those who had never trusted Dumo, and those who believed in the future Abioye had once promised. The seeds of rebellion were sown, and soon, the kingdom would know that its rightful prince had returned. The rising storm. With Chief Udo by his side and a growing network of loyalists spreading the word of Abioye's return, the kingdom began to stir. Quietly, whispers of rebellion spread through the capital and beyond. The people, weary of Dumo's tyrannical rule, began to hope for the impossible, that their lost prince was alive and would soon take back his throne. But Abioye knew that time was running out. The longer Dumo sat on the throne, the more difficult it would be to uproot him. In the shadows of the city, Abioye and his supporters plotted their next move. They could not rely on brute force alone. Dumo had fortified the palace with loyal guards and soldiers, and the capital was filled with spies who reported back to him. Abioye needed a plan that would strike at the heart of Dumo's power, a plan that would expose the traitor for what he truly was. A kingdom on edge. The kingdom was on the edge of revolt. As Abioye's network grew, so did the people's discontent with Dumo's rule. Taxes had been raised to unbearable levels, food had become scarce, and the once thriving villages that surrounded the capital were now struggling to survive. Dumo ruled through fear, silencing dissent and rewarding those who helped him maintain his grip on power. But Abioye knew that fear could be a double-edged sword. Dumo's power was fragile, built on lies and manipulation. If Abioye could publicly reveal the truth, if he could expose Dumo's betrayal in front of the kingdom, Dumo's reign would crumble. The people would turn against him, and the palace guards, many of whom were only loyal out of fear, would abandon him. The question was how. The confrontation begins. Abioye and Udo knew they had to lure Dumo into a public setting, a place where the people could witness the truth for themselves. They chose the Festival of Ancestry, a sacred event that celebrated the kingdom's royal bloodline and honored the spirits of the past. It was an annual festival that brought nobles and commoners alike into the heart of the capital. And this year, Dumo had planned to use the festival as a way to further solidify his power, presenting himself as the rightful heir to the throne. Abioye saw an opportunity. If he could confront Dumo during the festival, in front of the entire kingdom, he could force the traitor to answer for his crimes. But it would be a dangerous gamble. Dumo's forces would be present, and if the confrontation went poorly, Abioye could be captured or killed before he ever had the chance to reclaim the throne. Still, Abioye had no choice. The prophecy had foretold a kingdom in ruin, and the spirits had warned him that the choices he made would determine the kingdom's fate. He had to act. The Festival of Ancestry. The day of the festival arrived, and the capital was filled with people. Bright banners adorned the streets, and musicians played lively tunes as crowds gathered in the central square. At the heart of the festivities stood the royal palace, where Dumo prepared to make his grand appearance. The people cheered for him as he stepped onto the balcony, dressed in the royal regalia that had once belonged to Abioye. But beneath the surface, tension crackled in the air. Among the crowd were Abioye's loyalists, scattered throughout the square, waiting for the moment to strike. Chief Udo stood by Abioye's side in the shadows, ready to support him in whatever came next. The time had come. As Dumo raised his hands to address the people, Abioye stepped forward from the crowd. His hood was pulled low over his face, but his presence caused a ripple of murmurs to spread through the gathered crowd. He walked with purpose, each step measured and steady. When he reached the base of the palace steps, he threw back his hood, revealing his face to the people. A stunned silence fell over the square. The people's prince. People of the Serengeti. Abioye's voice rang out across the square, strong and unwavering. I am Prince Abioye, the rightful heir to the throne. I was betrayed by the man you now call your king. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd as the people struggled to reconcile the man before them with the prince they had believed dead. Some shouted in disbelief, while others stared in awe. But Dumo's reaction was immediate. His face twisted with fury as he leaned over the balcony, glaring down at Abioye. You dare show your face here? Dumo spat, his voice laced with venom. You are nothing but a ghost, a memory. You were lost to the desert, and I have ruled this kingdom in your absence. Abioye met Dumo's gaze without flinching. You did not rule in my absence, Dumo. You ruled through lies and treachery. You left me for dead, but I have returned. The crowd erupted into a frenzy of whispers. Could it be true? Had their prince really survived? The seeds of doubt had been planted, and Abioye seized the moment to press his advantage. You all know the truth in your hearts, Abioye continued, addressing the people directly. You have seen the kingdom suffer under Dumo's rule. You have watched as he drained this land of its wealth, as he corrupted everything my family built. But today, the truth will come to light. The duel for the throne. Dumo's fury boiled over. He had never expected Abioye to return, and now that the prince stood before him, he knew his carefully constructed lies were unraveling. Desperate to maintain control, Dumo descended from the balcony, pushing through the crowd with his guards at his side. He would not allow Abioye to take what he believed was rightfully his. You want the throne? Dumo sneered, drawing his sword. Then come and take it. Let the people see which of us is the stronger man. The tension in the square reached a breaking point as the crowd fell silent, watching the confrontation unfold. Abioye stepped forward, unarmed but resolute. He had no intention of fighting Dumo in a battle of strength. This was a battle of truth. But Dumo, driven by his arrogance and fear, lunged at Abioye. The clash of swords rang out, echoing through the square. Abioye, though unarmed, moved with the agility and precision he had honed over years of training. He dodged Dumo's attacks, his movements fluid and controlled. Dumo, on the other hand, fought with wild desperation. His strikes were fueled by rage, and his form was sloppy. Abioye could see the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing everything he had stolen. As the fight raged on, Abioye finally saw his opening. In one swift motion, he disarmed Dumo, sending the traitor's sword clattering to the ground. Dumo stumbled backward, breathless and beaten. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Abioye stood over his fallen adversary. The truth exposed. "You were never meant to rule, Dumo," Abioye said, his voice calm, but filled with conviction. "You betrayed me. You betrayed this kingdom, and now the people know the truth." Dumo, his face twisted with desperation, tried to scramble to his feet, but the guards who had once stood loyally by his side now hesitated. They had seen the prince's strength, and they had heard the people's murmurs of doubt. Slowly, one by one, the guards began to lower their weapons, their allegiance shifting back to the rightful heir. The crowd, which had been on edge just moments before, erupted into cheers. The people chanted Abioye's name, their voices rising like a wave that swept through the square. Dumo, now surrounded by those he had once commanded, realized that his time was up. His reign had ended. Abioye looked down at the man who had betrayed him, the man who had stolen his throne. "Justice will be served," he said, his tone final. Dumo was dragged away by the guards, his fate sealed. And as the people continued to cheer, Abioye stood tall, his heart filled with a mix of relief and determination. He had reclaimed his throne. But his journey was not yet complete. The prophecy still loomed, and the curse on his bloodline had yet to be lifted. The kingdom reborn. In the days that followed, Abioye began the long process of rebuilding the kingdom. The people, inspired by his strength and resilience, rallied around their rightful prince. Dumo's corrupt rule had left scars on the land, but under Abioye's leadership, the kingdom slowly began to heal. But even as peace returned to the Serengeti, Abioye knew that his greatest challenge still lay ahead. The spirits had warned him that his bloodline was cursed, and until that curse was broken, the kingdom would never truly be safe. Abioye's journey was far from over. The burden of kingship. The dust had settled, and the throne of the Serengeti was once again occupied by its rightful heir. Prince Abioye had faced betrayal, endured the harsh trials of the desert, and returned to reclaim his kingdom. The people celebrated his victory, and the capital buzzed with newfound hope. But beneath the surface, Abioye knew that his journey was far from over. The prophecy still weighed heavily on his mind, and the dark secret of his family's curse remained unresolved. As he sat on the throne that had once belonged to his father, Abioye reflected on the events that had brought him here. He had uncovered the truth about Dumo, and in doing so, had saved the kingdom from ruin. But the prophecy had foretold that his bloodline was cursed, and until he could break that curse, his kingdom would never truly be at peace. Abioye had been granted the throne, but the true challenge lay in confronting the legacy of his ancestors. A kingdom reborn, yet uncertain. In the weeks following Dumo's downfall, Abioye worked tirelessly to rebuild the kingdom. Villages were restored, trade resumed, and the people, once oppressed under Dumo's rule, began to flourish again. Abioye's reign was marked by fairness and justice, and he earned the trust of his people through actions, not just words. But every night, as he lay in his chambers, the words of the spirits echoed in his mind. The curse of his bloodline had yet to be broken, and the spirits' warning was clear. If he did not confront the darkness that lingered in his family's past, the kingdom could once again fall into chaos. The prophecy was not set in stone, but it would require Abioye to make difficult choices, choices that would determine not only his future, but the future of his entire kingdom. A final encounter with the spirits. One night, Abioye ventured once more to the desert, seeking the guidance of the spirits. He knew that to lift the curse and secure the kingdom's future, he would need their help. As he approached the cave where they had first appeared to him, the winds howled around him, carrying with them the whispers of ancient voices. The spirits materialized before him, their forms shimmering in the starlight. Abioye bowed his head in respect. "I have reclaimed my throne," he said, his voice steady. "But I have not forgotten the curse that hangs over my bloodline. I am here to fulfill the prophecy and break the curse once and for all." The leader of the spirits stepped forward, its glowing eyes fixed on Abioye. "You have shown strength and wisdom, Prince Abioye," it said. "But the path to breaking the curse will not be easy. You must confront the choices of your ancestors and make sacrifices of your own." Abioye's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood tall. "I will do whatever it takes," he declared, "for my kingdom, for my people, and for the future of my bloodline." A new beginning. With the spirit's guidance, Abioye embarked on the final chapter of his journey, a journey to cleanse his family's legacy and ensure that the kingdom of the Serengeti would never again be threatened by the mistakes of the past. The people had placed their faith in him, and Abioye was determined not to let them down. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but Abioye was no longer the prince who had been left for dead in the desert. He had grown into a leader, one who had learned that kingship was not about power, but about sacrifice and service to his people. The kingdom of the Serengeti would flourish once more under his rule, and though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: Abioye had the strength and wisdom to face whatever challenges lay ahead. If you enjoyed the story of the lost prince of the Serengeti, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales of betrayal, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. The story of Prince Abioye may be just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Together, we can keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching.